Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Carl.
Yes.
If that is your name.
That is my name.
Is it actually your name?
It is actually my name.
Okay, because I remember, isn't it in quotes somewhere?
Trey is in quotes somewhere.
Trey is in quotes.
I'm
okay.
third, and so people call me Trey.
I see. So Carl is your actual name. Trey is just...
I've been trying to drop Trey.
Okay.
So I went to the Army and I had to go by Carl.
Okay.
Because legal names, you don't have nicknames in the Army.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, Carl, Trey.
Well, let's start there because, again, I've known you through Highgrade Testing Lab.
Yes.
Is that... Also, what is the preferred nomenclature for your lab? Because I've always just called it Highgrade Labs, the Highgrade Testing Lab, which is actually correct.
I call it Highgrade Labs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is where I've initially met you, right? You were a West Point graduate before you got in this wacky cannabis testing world?
Yes.
Okay. From what I know about you, doesn't jive. So explain.
Is that right?
Yeah, it doesn't. You just do not seem like a military kind of guy. So what's the idea there?
I did go to West Point. I spent 5 years in the Army. I was an infantry officer, Ranger School. I spent 9 months in Afghan land. And when I realized pretty quickly that 5 years in the Army was enough for me. How you know me as someone who, like, it seems weird that I went to West Point in the Army. That's actually the way I was throughout the Army. Okay. And so I had a good time, got in a little bit of trouble here and there.
I see.
You know, I tried to be as free as I possibly could.
So you were a misfit the entire time.
I've just been a misfit since day one, I guess.
Was it a family thing or what made you want to go?
It might be a family thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be a family thing. In fact, the way I got into the cannabis industry was a call from my dad. My dad was in the cannabis industry like 20 years ago in Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, he's got a rap sheet to show for it. Just cannabis.
Okay. Okay.
He loves weed. Turns out I do too.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
So where's your family from?
So my dad is from Beaumont, Texas.
Okay.
And my mom is from Bartlesville.
Okay.
But I grew up in Enid.
In Enid?
Yeah.
And is this where said rap sheet was acquired?
Enid, Oklahoma City.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Was he a grower or?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't grow. He definitely didn't grow.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I think he just helped himself and his friends.
He was just a fan. Yeah. I think all of us on some level over the last 20 years have been involved in that.
Definitely.
And that shit smells. So sometimes if you got pulled over and your number came up, you went directly to jail, did not pass go. And now we can walk around with 3 ounces on the dashboard of our car if we have a little piece of plastic that says we can.
It's pretty wild. By the time so I didn't get into cannabis until pretty late. I was in my 20s before I really started using cannabis at all. It was in Oklahoma, really, when I came back. And so I started my relationship with cannabis, it being totally legal. And so I never had the experience of really like having to hide it and like having to be super secretive and stuff.
Lucky you.
For real. Yeah. So now when I go to other places where it's not legal and I pull out my grinder and roll up a joint like on a park bench, it's like, whoa. Oh shit, I'm not in Oklahoma anymore.
We're honestly, it's such a piecemeal. I traveled through kind of the lower Midwest earlier this summer.
Yeah.
And we had, nothing crazy, but we had a bunch of pre-rolls with us. And by a bunch, I mean, less than a dozen. It wasn't anything insane.
Yes.
But there was this weird patchwork of laws where you're like, okay, what's the deal in this state? Okay, what's the deal in this state? Where are the places that you travel now where people are the most up in arms if you bring out a grinder and start rolling one?
Well, I've gotten pretty good. Like I haven't had any bad experiences with that. The friends I'm with wherever I go are kind enough to, remind me to be careful.
Right.
But like just other countries.
Oh, other countries.
Yeah. So, like in the UK, for example, it's just really illegal there still. And so even though it seems like a lot of people like cannabis, but they're, it's still just super illegal. So you can't just walk down the street and smoke one like you can on 30th Street here in Oklahoma City.
For sure. There's the infamous UK cheese. The very, very popular strain over there. Okay. I didn't realize that that's still, And Mexico now? What is their system? I know that you'll be heading there.
Yeah, Mexico, it's legal. That was 2 years ago, I believe, and they issued a license to a Canadian company, I believe, but they've taken a long time to get regulations where they want them to be. And so I think they're only producing CBD. You might check that, but it's like supposedly legal and going to start being an industry there. But I think the government's having a hard time making regulations that everyone likes.
Fair. The reason I ask is you do seem to travel quite a bit.
Yes.
Even the last few months, a couple years, you were in Arizona for a minute.
Yeah, I was in Arizona. I love to travel. I love it.
I can tell.
I love it. Yeah.
Was that a business thing or personally? Were you just taking some time after?
No, I was in Arizona, helping build an expansion lab for Highgrade Labs, in Phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the Arizona system like as compared? I was in New Mexico earlier, late spring, I suppose. It's a very similar program, except they're full rec. Mm-hmm. But it seems like it's pretty much a similar lineup, except we have, even though it seems like the licensing system is about the same, they still add a considerable fewer number of dispensaries there. What's Arizona look like?
It is very different than it is here. There is a limited number of licenses there. And so the licenses are more valuable on the production side. Anyone can go be a lab there, which is what we did. But yeah, I think now they just issued another 26 licenses. I believe, again, you might check that. There's somewhere around 200 licenses. Is
it a medical or rec program?
It's both in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have, what's the population of Arizona roughly,
It's about 7 or 8 million.
That's what I was thinking. Like somewhere in there.
Somewhere around double Oklahoma's population.
And yet they only have a couple of hundred licensed businesses to service the entire, okay.
Mm-hmm. The companies there are just much larger.
Sure.
In general than the ones here.
So I would imagine because of that, and anyone, as you said, anyone can open a lab there, that the pie is much smaller to dish out of. Did you get your foothold there, or did you kind of get in there and decided not to? I've had an amazing experience in Phoenix over the last couple of years. I wouldn't say that we've had a business success there by any means, but I have learned so much. One of the things when we started in Oklahoma, I just have just the best team of people here in Oklahoma, and great people. We have all new instruments. Most of the people in the lab are fans also, and so that adds an element of people just give a shit about the tests. And but generally we can run the tests the way that we think is the best way to run a cannabis test, which is good for us because we care, and we have really, we do it correctly. And that's our reputation here in the state, is we will,
like we'll give you the real number, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. I hear some people complain about that sometimes.
So it's good. It's good and it's bad because on one hand, it's like we are able to develop the methods and standards that make sense. But also it allows people to, I don't think this is happening anymore, but in the early days, several years ago, I walked into labs that had like a 20-year-old instrument, HPLC, just unbelievable, like not running tests and giving you an Excel sheet that has numbers on it. Okay. Like that was happening in Oklahoma in the early days. So there was just a ton of freedom here. And it is really the Wild West. When we went to Arizona, it's different in Arizona. Like there's rules in Arizona. So we had difficulty because whereas here, like the lab oversight committee is like one guy.
Yeah. What's his name?
Lee Rhodes.
Yes, Lee. I've spoken to him. He's a very good guy.
He is. He's a character.
Who I just feel is tasked with something that's damn near impossible for one person to do.
I would not. I mean, God bless him. Like I wouldn't want that job. It seems hard. We like Lee. He's real professional, but we joke in the lab. We kind of like hope he just loves to smoke like every day. Like how else are you going to do this job?
I feel like I've asked him, and I don't feel like he answered directly, or he was like, no, not at all.
No.
But I've never met him in person. I only spoke to him on the phone several times during the pandemic because what do they call it? The surveillance lab that's supposed to calibrate. Yep. Where is that? Is that
I don't.
They were supposed to be working on a contract 2 or 3 years ago, and then it just fell off my radar. Who watches The Watchmen?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Or do they still not have that?
I don't think it exists anymore.
Okay.
Maybe it does.
Okay.
It's kind of like a weird gray area that we're not really sure about. We interacted with them a few times. Like they would bring samples to our lab and to other labs to run verification tests. But testing cannabis is hard. Like it's harder than testing ibuprofen pills or other like pharmaceutical products or oil or soil. It's sticky, and there's there's hundreds of different things in it that you can analyze for. And so it's just difficult. And so that QA lab, just like any lab that's starting out for the first time testing cannabis, just had a hard time with it, I think. And so we would try to get information from them like, hey, we have a question. Like, is it this or is it this? And it's like we never really got any straight answers on things. But I'm not even sure that exists anymore, to be honest.
Well, I mean, if you don't know, I certainly wouldn't.
Maybe
it was one of those, how you and I met. I think we had met just not too long before that, but I think the longest story I've ever done writing about cannabis was that story where I tried to quality test the labs. And like you said, one of the hardest things to do is try to homogenize a sample.
Yeah, really.
And so I remember calling you, I think it was, I'm like, so if I put this in a food processor and like shake it up and try to split it into 4 sample jars.
We talked about how to properly sample.
Yeah, I was like, is this as good as I can do? Because I don't want to, I'm not trying to.
You did a good job, if I remember.
Thank you.
Mixed it all up. All the samples were the same.
And I did. I even separated it out. I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I separated it out so that I wasn't putting just, stuff from the top, middle, and bottom.
Yeah.
I had found a way. I can't remember how I did it either. We devised some sort of method. It was like a sifter or something.
I remember, no bullshit. I remember thinking, wow, Matt did the science, ground it all up, different samples.
If you're going to make a point of, it is kind of, as you mentioned, the Wild West.
Yeah.
Not only on, growing and processing, but also even on testing. Mm-hmm. And you'd hear wildly disparate results. And I don't remember if this was, no, it wasn't, because it was one of the labs that we used. And then we had the famous purging of a particular lab here in the state, if you remember.
Yes.
So, you know, there's, it's one of those things that no shade on you in particular, but every time I talk about testing, no one seems to take it seriously either.
Right.
It seems like they've gotten such wildly disparate results, or they get things that they don't like.
Yes.
That there are just, it just doesn't seem like you can win.
It's hard to win.
In any way.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to win.
Even people who liked you, then they get a test result they don't like, and then they don't like you for a while.
Yes.
And then maybe on down the road, they find out they like other labs even less, and then come back.
Right.
So
it is a difficult part of the cannabis industry to be in. Because we have bad news sometimes. You know, if we're doing a good job, sometimes we have bad news. It's similar to like bedside manner. Just talking to someone, like it is the hardest part of running a cannabis lab, is having to talk with people who have grown, like it's like a literal baby to them, grown it for months and months, harvested it, dried and cured it, like just to find out, like some dude in the grow, some like 18-year-old dude in the grow, like went and bought some pesticide spray from Lowe's and sprayed it on the plants because there were spider mites on it and he didn't want to get caught and fired. Like, and having to, you know, give that information, like all of this stuff fails really bad. Yeah. Well, you know, who knows how expensive the crop was. Right. So yeah, it's difficult to do that part of it.
Let's dig deep here. Give me a horror story or two. What are some of the worst reactions you've ever had to an unpleasant test result?
I mean, I've been cussed out over the phone more times than I can count.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've been away from the phones and daily operations in Oklahoma for a while now, but that is a difficult part. Like we call them like the upfront people or the samplers, who have to communicate, you know, like we like communicating because, you know, it's more than just giving a piece of paper with results. Like if we have the ability to, we like to be able to like say, this was the issue. Yeah. This is the thing that probably you used because we've seen it 10,000 times. Yeah. No, there aren't any stories in particular that pop out.
Well, damn. I was trying to draw something ugly and vicious out of it. We'll circle back to it. And something else I'd heard, what is it with the pre-roll testing now? Do they require that the paper it's tested? Is that right? That they now require people to basically chop up the paper with?
I would need to check.
I don't know. I guess you've been away from it for
like that specific rule change. Like I'm not sure. You know, generally the rule of thumb is like you just want to test what the end product is. Right. In a perfect world, that's all you test is just like the end product that sits on a dispensary shelf. You know, if you're a big time processor and you're buying bulk biomass, like you as a business decision, you want to, you know, you want to make sure that like at least a pesticide test has been run on that truckload of flour that you're buying.
Yeah, sample sizes seem to keep shifting as well.
Yeah, they do. It's like it feels like a constant battle to try and keep that sample size like reasonably low. Here in Oklahoma, it's been okay, but like in Maryland, for example, where we're at, they require like all in all 14 grams. I believe it's 14 grams, and that's like a concentrate. Okay, which is a lot. Yeah, it's just a lot. And so
especially of concentrate, that's a half ounce you're working with.
Like we can run Like there are definitely people who disagree with us, but we have like our PhD chemists will tell anyone that we can run a good test with 5 grams. We don't need 14.
Right.
And so it feels like we're always fighting the regulatory body to keep that low because they don't always realize like what this means. It's like 14 grams of live rosin. Like they're paying more just to give a sample that we're going to have to throw away at the end of it than they are on the test itself.
Right.
Wait,
you throw them away? You don't have some sort of ammo dump in the back?
It's sad. It is so sad.
What do you guys have to do? Is there a waste company that does it, or do you dispose of it on site?
I think there's 10 waste disposal companies here in Oklahoma.
I had heard that, but again, those are one of those gray areas that I don't really hear too much about as a reporter because it's not really a sexy side of the industry. You're not like, and now for a profile of the trash company. But speaking of profiles of companies,
yes.
How's your competition now? I mean, obviously some didn't make it.
Yes.
Have there been a lot of labs that have gone out of business since the beginning? What does the playing field look like now compared to then, I suppose is my question.
It seems like, there's a handful of labs here that are doing well. I believe. I think there's still 20 licensed labs here.
Okay.
And so maybe it's hard to know for sure, but there's a good handful of them that like we have relationships with the good labs here in Oklahoma City so that we can, like, if we have a question about something, we can send a sample out to another lab and ask them to verify it for us. If we get weird numbers.
You'd probably be one of the better people to talk to about attrition as well. Mm-hmm. There's a good number of licenses still out there.
Yes.
Thousands of them between growers and processors. Mm-hmm. Are you starting to see a slowdown in that? Because again, I'm not sure. It seems like a lot of these folks are quietly going out of business while their licenses are still active.
There are still people coming online for the first time in Oklahoma.
All right.
And there's consolidations happening. So smaller grows getting bought up by larger entities. We've seen that. But yeah, it is shocking here. How many? 4 years? 5 years?
5, yeah.
People coming on for the first time. I have to believe that people are still optimistic that Oklahoma is going to be a good place to continue to grow cannabis into the future as it becomes legal everywhere.
Yeah. I got a call from my dad yesterday and one of his friends.
Yeah.
Been meeting some folks and, he leased a property of his out for a dispensary and he just drove in and saw a dude with a bunch of hoop houses. And what do you know? He's a grower. And now they're talking about partnering and opening up a dispensary in small town northeastern Oklahoma. So there are still people who, after all of the stories, still want to jump in.
It is just wild here. Did you see that? Did you see the report that the OMA did?
Oh yeah.
What are we producing? Like 30 times the amount of?
Oh, it's something insane. Yeah, it was like 32 times per, and it's a very liberal amount per patient too. Yeah. It's not like some small amount.
I just love Oklahoma. I really do. Like that is the kind of just weird, outlandish thing that, of course, is going to happen in Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
People ask me like, what is Oklahoma like? And I'm like, man, I really don't know.
Yeah.
Like I've spent years here and it is just an interesting place.
I've come up with the answer for this.
Tell me, I'd love to hear
I figured this out between the time when we reconnected and now.
Yeah.
We are the northern South.
Okay.
And the eastern West.
We are the northern South and eastern
West. Eastern West.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're about as far east as you can go while still maintaining that western vibe, and about as north as you can go while still being the South.
Interesting.
It's that intersection. If you think about it, I think it plays.
Yeah.
Feel free to argue with me because I'm still road testing this theory.
I mean, we don't have anything in common with the East Coast.
You're right.
Really.
You're right.
And that does resound. I spent a little bit of time in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And something interesting about that state is on the west side is Kansas City, and on the east side is St. Louis. And those two cities are completely different.
Yeah, you see, that's wild. I just went through St. Louis a couple months ago. It was my second time in.
Yep.
But I've never been to Kansas City. So tell me how these things are different.
So you probably noticed St. Louis is kind of like anyone from these cities are just going to hate me for this, but it's like a mini Boston, you know. It has an East Coast vibe to it. There's townhouses, there's, you know, it's just.
I've never been to Boston, but I definitely know what you're saying. As far as, you know, I've seen architecture in movies.
Can you imagine it?
Yes.
It
seems doesn't seem wrong.
Yeah, it's different.
Okay.
It's a lot different than Oklahoma.
Okay.
But Kansas City is okay, we're close to Oklahoma.
Okay.
When you get to Kansas City.
See, and that's kind of the way I break down Tulsa and OKC in this state. OKC is a southern city, like Dallas, and Tulsa is a Midwestern city.
Okay. I get that. That's a good one.
Yeah. But it's just, again, I've lived here my entire life. You moved here when you were how old?
I grew up here. I grew up till I was 18 in Enid.
Okay.
But then I spent like 13, 14 years away. And
right.
Came back for.
And so you went to West Point for still reasons that are still inexplicable to me. And then lived in New York City for a while. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
How long were you in New York?
I was in Manhattan for 4 years. 4
years. Okay. Yeah. And then after that you went to?
After Manhattan, I moved back here.
Okay.
So Manhattan was at the end of my stint away from Oklahoma.
So how did you get into the whole? Okay, let me finish the thought about Oklahoma.
Sure.
My point is, we've lived here.
Yes.
Me my entire life.
Yes.
You for a good time of it.
A good chunk.
And we still have no idea how to describe this place.
That's right.
So
you can find anything you want here, I think, is what I'm realizing.
You know, and that's kind of what I like about it. But at the same token, it's kind of nuts. It is the same thing with geography. I mean, we've got small deserts, some small mountains.
Literal dunes.
Yeah.
Small mountains.
Exactly. And then you've got forested area. Exactly.
Small lakes.
Exactly.
Actually, there's some big lakes here.
Yeah. And none of them are real, though.
That's right. They're man-made,
They're
aren't
all
they?
man-made.
Is that still something, an accolade that Oklahoma has? Most man-made lakes.
I don't know.
Any state in the union.
I don't know. I guess the lake-making days, they seem to have been done before I was born. I don't recall hearing any plans to dig any new lakes here nor elsewhere.
Is that like New Deal stuff? Is that what all that was?
It has to have been. Yeah, I think it was Army Corps of Engineers where they were like, we got to put people to work. Anyway, yeah. How do you get into the science of cannabis testing? Where did you learn these skills, and what made you decide that you wanted to be on the laboratory side?
Sure. It started when I was in New York. With a call from my dad, who just loves everything about cannabis. And he said, son, weed's legal in Oklahoma. Better get your ass back here to build a grow. He wanted to grow. And so originally I came back to do that, to grow. I had some family out in Western Oklahoma, and we were going to use some land, construct a building out there. I watched just hundreds of hours of YouTube videos on growing, and I just learned everything I possibly could about building a facility to grow. That was the plan. And then I started learning a little bit about processing, and there's this whole other side of the industry that is, creating all the processed goods from the distillate to shatter, all the way to gummies. We even bought we brought a $40,000 processing rig.
Oh, wow.
And this was April of 2019? That was the year after legalization.
Yeah. Legalized. The vote was in 18.
Yeah. We had designs, had started interviewing people to help us, growers, people who'd operated processing equipment in the past. And I went to the Canacon here in Oklahoma City to meet some vendors for mechanical, for water purification, for nutrients, for packaging. And while I was there, I saw there was a Shimadzu booth, which Shimadzu produces instruments, testing instruments, and there was no one at the booth, but they had these amazing instruments, and I'm like, what is this? And they started telling me, oh, this is testing. And I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a grower or processor, like, I'm going to have to test? Like, what's that?
Right.
Like, and I look over and one of the labs who existed at the time had a booth. And I saw, okay, so this is a real thing, testing. Like, I pulled out a piece of paper, like, did some back of the envelope math and realized that, like, I was going to have a testing bill. And then I thought, well, there's like 5,000 grows in this state. And so maybe I should take a look at this testing thing. And so from there, I went home. I called, I thought Oregon, I had heard that Oregon was pretty close in testing rules to Oklahoma. And so I picked up the phone and called every single laboratory, operating laboratory in Oregon until I convinced one of them to let me fly there and spend 4 days in their lab, took copious notes, got to meet, all the people, got to know all the instruments, like everything from top to bottom about a testing lab. And I came back to Oklahoma and built it as good as I could based on what I had learned there.
How much did it cost to build the initial Highgrade?
The instruments, with the building, it was around it's around $4 million to build like a good lab.
Wow.
You can spend much less than that, but then it causes problems.
Of course.
Then
it's not high grade.
It's not high grade, baby.
So have you been able to, again, you don't have to give me a dollar amount here, but have you been able to recoup that at a decent pace?
Yeah. As
compared to a lot of these other growers and processes, which I'm sure now,
definitely,
in retrospect, you're glad you didn't go that direction.
I mean, I do believe I would have had a great time and been successful had I gone down that path. This is certainly, I feel like, open, like I wouldn't change anything about my past.
Right.
First of all, and so I'm really grateful that I made that switch, just because I'm like, here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the same thing. And, I went from being a crime writer 1 month to the next month. I'm like, well, I guess I'm the cannabis reporter now.
What?
And I
love doing different things too. Learning new things, doing different things.
Speaking of which, doing the same thing in a different place. You guys are open in Maryland now?
Yes, we are not open. We have one, we're like right there. In the next month, we're opening in Maryland and in New Jersey.
Why those places?
They were legal there. The new states, and so it's nice to go to the newer states. It's hard to go into an existing state. Like we wouldn't go into California or Oregon or Washington just because it's an established market. It's an established market. They have relationships, growers and processors, our potential clients. It's better to go to the states that are new. We can have more of an impact there. It's a little more exciting than jumping into just an established market. So
right.
Maryland and New Jersey were just great picks.
You going to jump into New York? Go back to your old stomping grounds? Now they're legal?
Maybe. To be honest, I'm hyper focused on Maryland and New Jersey right now, so we'll see what's around the corner. But
how dare you put one foot in front of the other?
Right.
No shotgun approach when it comes to opening $4 million laboratories.
We did that a little bit. with the labs currently, and certainly have learned some lessons.
Well, not to raise a sore subject or throw salt in the wound, but what happened with Arizona?
Arizona was our first expansion lab.
Okay.
So we clearly did a really good job here in Oklahoma, and we have a pretty big percentage of the testing market share here. When we went to Arizona, we had never operated in another state.
Sure.
So kind of back to this understanding that it's the Wild West here and there really aren't a lot of rules, at least there weren't in the beginning. When we showed up in Arizona, there's the lab oversight committee there is like a no shit like entity with 6 like highly experienced lab people, and they have outlines of like very, very specific ways that a lab must run each individual test.
Okay.
And so that was a big hurdle for us, because the mistake that we made is we went in thinking that we could just apply our very good Oklahoma methods and SOPs to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
It's testing cannabis here should be the same as testing cannabis in Arizona, or so we thought. But when we got there, and we got all our instruments, and we got we had an amazing staff there. By the time that we got set up, like, we realized that this entity, like, none of the methods that we had were in line with the specifications, exactly how they wanted us to run the tests. And so we spent like a year like building this lab to, specs of basically making an Oklahoma lab, but it was completely different.
Oh no.
And so it was just difficult. It was like really hard because, well, one, the team there worked really hard on bringing this lab online. They did an amazing job doing that. I hired another West Point grad. So actually we make an effort to hire West Point grads to run the labs in each of the different states.
Okay.
Yeah. And so here in Oklahoma, Tyler Croft is running the lab. He's a 2016 West Point grad.
Okay.
And then Big Mike Enright is in New Jersey running that lab. He's a 2009 West Point grad.
Also some young ones.
Yeah.
Because you graduated when?
2010.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
2010. And so the model is we have that person who runs the lab, and then we have a high-powered lab director in New Jersey. It's Dr. Martellini. Anyways, for the guy running the lab in Phoenix, it was especially difficult because, I mean, we made the mistake of trying to build this lab that just wasn't going to work there. And so after a year, we had to change up everything. And so during this whole period, we're burning money. It's like, that's really difficult for morale, which is like extremely, extremely important. I think it's just important in general in business. It's especially important to me. Like, we spend so much time with the people we work with. Like,
right.
Would just always prefer for it to be a nice place to work and for people to be excited for what we're doing. And so when it drags on like that, it's just difficult. It's just hard. So ultimately in Arizona, we had a falling out with the guy running the lab there. All this time, relationships were being built between labs and grows. And so we lost, it was crazy, Matt. So lost the guy running the lab in Arizona, and he went and worked for our competition there.
Oh, wow. That stings.
Which, and so that was it. That hurt. But even then, I understood it. It was just hard. It was our first expansion lab, and so we made a lot of mistakes that we learned from. We eventually got our license, but after 2 years and some change, the market is difficult there. there's a whole bunch of labs there that decided to go, like good labs too. And I looked into the future. I should say we looked into the future and just didn't, like, it just wasn't going to be a profitable endeavor.
Right. No path forward.
So just much better for us to focus on the other labs that we know are going to do good.
And I mean, the beautiful thing about that as compared to other things is you can still take that equipment and move it across state lines legally, right?
Sure.
Testing equipment's testing equipment.
It was a crazy period.
It's
another West Point grad who we had been talking quite a bit. I hired him to come to Phoenix, and a whole bunch, basically some regulations, and it was just a difficult time. And so he actually came to Phoenix. He brought his family, and like he was excited to like start going, and he was there for just a couple of months. And I'm like, man, I'm sorry. Like this just isn't gonna, I just don't think for you, for us, like we just need to call it.
Word. I imagine that had some profound psychological ramifications.
Big time, man.
Especially when things were going so well. So what did you kind of do in the aftermath of that?
So after that, I needed a break. I needed a break. So I went to Peru.
Peru?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I'll need to kind of back up so it's been about 2 years now since my first adventure into psychedelics.
Why did I know this was going this direction?
It's something I am just profoundly grateful for. So about 2 years ago, I went to Mexico City just to take a breather, just by myself, to go walk around the city. Mm-hmm. I love walking.
Yeah.
I go to cities and I just walk.
I understand. When it's not 100 million degrees outside, I walk
so sad when it's
3 to 5 miles a night myself. I also enjoy the good stroll.
Oh, yes.
Anyway,
I'll go to Manhattan. The last time I went to Manhattan, this is what I did. I showed up. I left the place I was staying at 11 p.m. and then I walked 14 miles around the island until the wee hours of the morning, just walking, observing, just enjoyed the hell out of it.
Excellent.
It's like, that's a good time.
Absolutely.
So I went to Mexico City to do that. And while I was there, I met a cannabis and psychedelic doctor.
Okay.
And we hit it off. We were near Chapultepec Park. The first day we just hung out, talked. Like I was totally open to the things that he was saying about, using cannabis and psychedelics. I myself used cannabis to help me get off alcohol. Mm-hmm. When I got out of the Army 8 years ago now. So I have a huge respect for cannabis. It's a whole nother story for that reason. But I hadn't tried psychedelics. So we hung out the first day. The second day we smoked a joint together. And then on the third day we rented a car and drove 2.5 hours away from the city into an area called Malinalco.
Okay. And you didn't know this guy 2 days before. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do go on.
Absolutely not. Drove out on a Saturday, ate a whole bunch of mushrooms.
And by a whole bunch, you mean
22 grams.
Oh my God. Yeah, a person?
Yeah.
Ooh. In one fell swoop?
Uh-huh. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Like I would not recommend that to anyone.
I've done a hearty, healthy, heroic dose, and
my guess is that the mushrooms just weren't that potent.
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't do that now.
Of course not.
Like really. Like if I was gonna go, like a dose is like 5 grams.
Yeah.
So that was just
again, that's strong for most people.
It's like part of the weirdness, craziness of the story. But I did have an amazing experience.
Was it your first time doing psilocybin?
Yeah.
And you went from 0 to 22 grams.
Yeah.
Which, to put in context, is a little over 3/4 of an ounce.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It was, so one of the guys I was there with, he was like getting everything together and like weighing everything out. And he weighed out the 22.5 grams and he threw it at me. He said, "This is yours." It's like a gallon bag.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know how physically you were able to eat that many in one sitting.
Yeah, it took some time.
But
it took some time.
By the time you made it through the second quarter, the first had already run through. This is why you could do it. Teasing.
It's worth mentioning because that is just it's like crazy numbers, a crazy thing. It is worth mentioning. The best way to imagine this experience is like it was an inpatient.
Okay.
Like inpatient therapy session.
Oh, okay. This was like
the dude's a real doctor. Like
okay.
PhD.
Was this a clinical setting though?
I think like this is a difference with psychedelic, like psychotherapy and traditional like therapy, the way we think about it in the Western way. A good setting to do emotional and psychiatric work is outside.
Absolutely.
You know, so
I always tell people if you're going to consume psilocybin, do not do it indoors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a bad time anytime I try to trip inside.
Yeah, you just don't, you want to be in nature. Like the point of it is to realize you're just part of nature.
Absolutely.
So not part of a sheetrock wall with paint on it.
Absolutely.
So yes, it was a setting. It was beautiful in the mountains. There was a fire. There was shade, water. It was nice.
So clinical, but not sterile.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I just feel I think you're right. I think outdoor is kind of the best place to do psilocybin, even as a medicinal setting.
Yes.
So why the choice to go this hard right out of the gate?
I don't think I have a good answer for that, except that it felt right.
Okay.
That experience began this journey for me that I'm happy to report like 2 years later. Like the reason I did all of that is to help me with my anxiety and my depression, PTSD related things, you know, and like, I'm like stoked about all this because I don't think I'll ever be completely free of all those negative emotions. Sure. Like, I think that a big part of this like short time we have here is just this experience of extracting all of that negative shit out of our bodies and out of our hearts. And so like, it has helped me tremendously just not to have negative emotions. Sure. Or at least as little as possible. I still get upset and angry and stuff, but I just am better at dealing with it. Like that experience started a journey for me to just help me self-heal. Yeah. When I'm feeling super anxious or I'm feeling like, or I think I'm feeling depressed. And so it has had this tremendous effect on me, a positive one. So I went to Peru because that's where this doc that I had met, he had in his, was building a practice there. He had worked in Peru for like 14 years. And so after Arizona, where I needed a break, I had already gone down there for a month for treatment. Mm-hmm. And so I went back there for a month. And by treatment, I really just mean hanging out in Peru for a month. Sure. Like surprisingly didn't do a whole lot of plant medicine while I was there. Smoked a joint once a week, ate a little bit of mushrooms. Still haven't had an Aya experience yet. I'll probably do that.
What is that?
Ayahuasca. Oh, okay. Haven't done that yet.
Yeah, that one's, I've known a couple of people who've done that one, and it seems still a little scared of that one. Yeah. It seems like it'll be quite a bit.
It's like an experience. Yeah. It's like a long thing.
Yeah, where honestly, it seems like that is better served by someone who has quite a bit of experience with it, a guide or shaman, if you will.
Definitely not something to do on your own.
Yeah. Then, I think especially, how old are you?
36.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm 40. So I think
Cool.
that there's always kind of been, historically speaking, this look at psychedelics of, you eat mushrooms and you see colors kind of thing. Whereas in the past few years, using it as a treatment is actually really starting to take hold. And what's weird now is I don't hear many people talking about eating mushrooms just to trip.
Yes.
I hear about them microdosing or taking a gram or two to get some sort of effect, but to deal with trauma or depression, anxiety, things like that, more than I do see it as a party drug.
Oh, yeah. I can't even imagine psilocybin as a party drug.
I mean, that's how I first did it. And
that must have sucked.
I mean, I was with some of my best friends.
Okay.
And we were outside for most of it.
Okay. All right.
So it was one of those where I kind of went into it as a party drug, but by the end of the night, I was like, oh no, I'm learning a lot of things about myself and the world around me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of switched it up and future senses, still kind of same scenario with folks and all, but I went into it not really expecting a party. Went into it looking to do a little work.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, there you go. A little party, a little work.
There you go. So you went down there, and honestly, it's the same thing I said at the beginning of the summer when we left print. It's hard taking a psychological blow of like, you're trying to do something, you put your body and soul into it, and for circumstances, many of which are just completely outside of your control, it doesn't work out. You can't help but take it personally.
Sure.
So, you've just got to
get over.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've just kind of got to go out there and clear your mind. Mm-hmm. So since then, I think you've alluded to that you're constantly doing some smaller microdosing regimen.
I think that I don't know. Like I'm not a physician. I'm not even I have had some personal experience. I do think that there's a difference between taking large doses, which I've had that experience. Mm-hmm. That's just a great way to really just get to the meat of it and see how
knock some shit loose.
Yeah. But then on the other side, there is the microdose aspect of it, and that I think is just a different thing. Like I think in the future, people will be eating small amounts of psilocybin as a replacement for antidepressants. That's not a novel thought. I've never, I have used psilocybin in small doses, and it has helped me on a daily basis to maintain higher vibration thoughts,
So in the
things
same
like
way,
gratitude and compassion, and
in the same way that you replaced cannabis, you replace alcohol with cannabis, rather. Were you ever on anxiety medication or antidepressants?
I never was.
But you knew, kind of like me, you're like, I probably should be at some point.
Because the small amounts of psilocybin really, really, really helped me. Mm-hmm. There's a huge future there, which is really exciting. I think that it gives me hope. People like to, people may complain about the state of things now, and there's so much, there's just issues, there's psychological issues, post-pandemic stuff. People have been cooped up. It's caused all these weird things. It seems like everyone's yelling at each other. Mm-hmm.
And a weird bit of Jungian synchronicity last night before bed, someone had posted a Terrence McKenna clip where they were basically saying things are going to get, he died 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So this was recorded, I believe, in the late 90s. Yes. And he's like, things are going to get so much weirder. And and he kind of just lays out where politically we are. And he's like, but these are the growth pains.
Yes.
Of a society that's coming into its next stage of being. And so I hope there is something to that,
I am a diehard optimist. Life is so much better that way for me.
I know. I wish I could. I've talked to to some psychologists who are like, man, you really just see the world through a glass darkly, don't you? Very much so.
Yeah, we should go eat.
But at the heart of it, it's the whole line of, every cynic is just a disappointed idealist. But yeah, I feel like this is either going to what we're experiencing now, which to me, having conversations like this is on some level therapeutic.
Sure.
Just getting away from the bullshit of text messages or, writing news stories, social media, and just sitting here with people and having long form conversations, often meandering. They just go their own way.
Yeah.
Like this is helping me to kind of reconnect to the reasons that I got into this business and the reasons why I
love to
still enjoy being a human being,
I love to hear that. You're really good at this. So
well thanks.
Like I'm sure it gives you joy. I love that.
I do. I dig it. So I love what you're saying as well. How long do you think though?
Yeah.
That it's going to take us to get our shit together and kind of make this shift? Do you think it's going to be a slow burn, or do you think it's going to be
like we're still not legal federally on cannabis yet?
Yeah, you're right.
So that just adds like just a whole bunch of rational people who are correct. Like they don't want to go to prison.
Right.
So hell no, I'm not going to mushrooms. Like,
right.
No. And so it's just hard, like until it becomes more socially acceptable, like people just have to understand what it is.
Right.
It's scary. Like just like anything that someone doesn't understand, it is scary. What? I'm going to lose my ego?
Right.
Like I'm going to die?
Right.
Like I don't want that. Like I like my ego. Look where my ego has got me.
I know.
Like I've got all these things. I've got the car and the house and the job and money. Like what's wrong with my ego? I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah. And then you take some mushrooms and you're like, uh-oh. Because that's what happened to me. Is every time I take a good healthy dose, and especially the more ego I come into that dose with, the more ego gets stripped out. And I'm like, oh man, I've been focusing on the wrong things. This is why I've taken a good prolonged absence from being on a psychedelic regimen, simply because I think in my heart of hearts, I know I'm like, you're making some tragic missteps with the way that you're approaching life. And I'm not necessarily ready for a course correction.
Yes.
But I think at some point it's just like anything else. You just got to rip the Band-Aid off. And especially considering, we've done half a dozen of these episodes so far. And I think psychedelics has come up, or I've brought it up in at least 2, if not 3 of them.
Hell yeah.
So I feel like we're getting there.
This helps.
But it's just in the culture right now.
Yeah.
Like this is a huge thing right now. And my cynicism though, is looking back at Dr. Timothy Leary and LSD.
Yes.
I mean, he was trying to pull that shit 50 years ago, and it still never has really taken root. But I feel like in the same way with cannabis, like there was that strong antipathy towards it for so long. And then suddenly that kind of melted for cannabis.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people, especially younger folks, who look at it. Even police officers, a lot of the police officers on the street are like, yeah, I smoked joints in high school. I know it's not, anything crazy. So I feel like we're also going through a very quick burst of, well, if they told us this was so bad for us and it turns out it's actually so good for us, what else have they lied to us about?
What else?
Exactly.
What else?
And I think there is something.
Definitely what else things for sure.
It's a hippy dippy thought, but I mean, psychedelics do pose a danger to the status quo in this country.
Everywhere. Yeah, it's a pretty scary thing.
But thank God we got West Point grads like you on our side.
Saying it's fine, you guys. Why are we taking all this shit so serious? Like really, like we are flying through this cosmos on a rock. Like you really care what Sally thinks about your shoes?
I know.
Like,
I know.
Do you like your shoes? Then wear them.
I know. And that's the thing is like in the course of time, it's all a blink.
Just a blink.
Like, and honestly, who knows what happens with this memory bank of things we've created.
Yeah.
I mean, in my most cynical sense, I'm like, when we die, the electrical storm inside our skull just dissipates. And so what was it all worth? And I'm like, well, to me, that's a chance to have a lot more fun with things rather than be like, oh, what was it worth?
Yes.
So what other plant medicines have you been experimenting with? I'm curious because I feel like you're walking down a path that I'm about to embark upon sooner than later. So I'm curious about following in your footsteps.
I have been very methodical with it and really have tried psilocybin in different ways, macrodose, smaller doses. DMT is pretty cool.
Okay. DMT is another one of those big beasts where I'm less scared of that because of the duration.
Yes.
But I hear when you're in the midst of it, the duration, it may to an outsider seem like it's lasting 15 minutes, but when you're in the throes of it, I hear it can seem like it's lasting years.
I have I've sat with one of the coolest thing about plant medicine. I like to sit with people and like that, like I enjoy that, just helping people hold space. Just in general, I enjoy that. And so I get to observe people do, different things with the medicine. And so I've seen people completely wig out on DMT, and like those are some of the scarier stories. And they last forever. My experiences have been different. This is what it looks like for me on a DMT trip. I sit there still and I see beautiful prisms and I have an overwhelming sensation that everything is just fine.
Okay.
That's it.
And how's the sensation of time when you're in it?
If there's music playing, it kind of fades out like I'm underwater. Time, like I don't have this experience like I'm gone for hours. It's just a very serene period of time where I see like an inverse rainbow is it's like black with colors. And it's like the feeling is like, this is fine. Everything's fine.
Fantastic.
What are you worried about? You're fine.
Well, speaking of serene periods of time, our time is up.
Is it really?
It has been great talking to you. We will do it again.
Wow.
We're going to pick up where we left off on down the road. I know you've got 5 to 30 new cannabis laboratories to open across the planet before we reconvene.
That is so fast.
But we're going to talk about this again, and maybe we'll even embark on a journey together. What say you, Carl?
Let's go.
Let's go.